So we'll explore the themes of the High Holy Days on 4 different levels, beginning with the simplest level and then going into the intellectual, the emotional, intellectual, and spiritual dimensions of what it means to prepare for the High Holy Days. We'll also probably spend a little more time this evening talking about Rosh Hashanah. And next week, we'll go deeper into our exploration, and we'll spend a little more time talking about Yom Kippur. But before I begin, I'd like to offer a prayer for the study of Torah, because this is exactly what we're doing. And it's very common in our tradition to study Torah from these 4 different levels, looking at it from 4 different perspectives. And so those who know the blessing for Torah can join me. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher kiddushanu b'mitzvotav v'tzivanu la'asok b'divrei Torah. We are thankful for this opportunity to soak ourselves in the wisdom of Torah, to engage in its study. Now I'll say a few words about our Pardes model, and then I'll give my colleague Mitch an opportunity to speak also. Pardes is a word in Hebrew that means like the garden, kind of like an idyllic, what's the word? Orchard. Paradise, exactly. But it's really an acronym for 4 different levels, modes of interpretation. So beginning with the Pei, the Pei stands for Peshat. You'll see that if you can read my small handwriting. It stands at the bottom for the level of Peshat, the simple interpretation, the most literal. And then, should we turn it a little bit so you can see it? And then we ascend to the next level. The Resh represents Remez. It's a kind of a hint, a suggestion. It's something that can be understood on an allegorical level. So we'll understand it from the allegorical level, and I'll come back to that in a minute. If we ascend to the Dalet for Drash, that's understanding what we're reading or what we're studying from the Midrashic level. So not only allegory, but maybe how the rabbis interpreted through the process of Midrash, explaining it maybe on a deeper level, more far-flung. And then finally, Sod represents the secret, the mystical, the spiritual dimension of interpretation. Now, these 4 levels also happen to correspond to what Mitch talks about frequently, and which is very common in the Kabbalah and the study of Jewish mysticism, the 4 worlds. The 4 worlds we understand to be operating at all times, although our awareness might not be quite so evenly distributed among those worlds. But we'll begin with the simple, the physical world, and then the emotional, the intellectual, and the spiritual. So all these 4 worlds are operating fully at all time. We just might not always be aware of the spiritual in particular. We're usually more aware of the physical, but these other dimensions will bring our awareness to those dimensions in the course of our study. So you'll see some correlation between these different levels of interpretation and these different modes of being. Anything you want to add to that to make it clearer?
There's a basic rule: you go up to down or down to up. And as one prepares for anything, we might begin with a great spiritual rule and then bring it down to earth, or we might begin with details and bring it up towards heaven, if you like. And we've decided in this workshop we would begin with the material things. So if you imagine yourself getting ready for Rosh Hashanah, there are material things that are necessary in order to do this, and we might begin by asking you, to pair off, speak to the people around you. If there's somebody you don't know, introduce yourself, and talk about the material, the physical things that you might need to gather, the physical actions you might take to prepare for the holy day. And then we'll collect them. And then once we've laid a material foundation, then we're going to go on to Remez, which would be the emotional preparation. and some of the things that we find in these various worlds might surprise you, and I suspect they're going to surprise us also. So take a couple moments, pair off, and talk about physical preparations for the holy days, the way you've experienced in the past and what you might be doing now.
What about you guys? Do you have any physical things you have? So we got our apples, our honey, right? In the house.
Which one? Susie Goldberg. Hi. Clean out the birds' cages thoroughly. Thoroughly.
That's right, that's right. I always get a new honey, you know, I don't use the old honey. I always have like a new honey. I like having a new honey. Yeah. Local honey, it's good for your allergy, your immune system, right?
Repairs
Physical aspects of your preparation. Who would like to begin?
Honey. New honey.
You need to have honey. Just go ahead and call it out.
Paying half my temple dues so I can get my
For those paying half the temple dues, I want to make sure that gets out on the internet.
Eating.
What was it?
Eating, preparing meals.
Any special foods for Rosh Hashanah? Brisket, challah. What shape would the challah be? Round challah. Kugel.
A new fruit.
And for those who are eating here, reservations.
Reservations for those eating it? Margaret, what did you say?
New fruit. A new fruit.
Seriously? A new fruit?
Yeah. New fruit.
Was that something that you observed growing up, or is that something new?
Something I acquired.
Something acquired. So a new fruit. Interesting. You run out of fruit eventually.
You don't run out
No,
of
you don't run out of
what
fruit.
family is.
Family visiting.
Family visiting is almost emotional now. That's, but things transcend worlds. Everything transcends worlds. Anything else physical?
Right.
So far.
Does this count, the
We
musical
had a lot of
scores?
spring cleaning.
The scores?
Yeah, can I share what my physical
Absolutely,
preparation
please.
is?
I would love to hear that.
Okay. This is a book called Yamin Norim, published in 1990. This is all the possible choral music for Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur. This is a book called Shira Teshuvah, which means Songs of Repentance, published in 2000, 10 years later. Notice in 2000, it's not the big book of classical choral music, it's now solo singing with piano accompaniment. Not that every temple observes that, but so we have the choral singing, we have the solo singing, and then we have what I have extracted from both books and prepared. That's my physical preparation.
For us, it's a matter of robes. To robe or not to robe, that is the question. To robe or not to robe. How many vote for robes? How many vote for not for robes?
Robes.
Alan votes for robes, so we wear robes.
Remember smelling salts?
Smelling, oh, like getting ready for the fasting?
No, that's for Yom Kippur, that's next week.
Same deal.
Same deal.
Sending Shana Tova, emails, cards.
New Year's cards.
Yeah.
Greetings cards. How many,
Email or...
how many of us send New Year's cards?
Email.
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 I'll send them via... Used
How many of
to.
us send them by mail?
We used
Still
to.
have some. Bless you, the post office bless you.
Not going to help them.
You know something? We have missed the primary physical symbol of Rosh Hashanah.
You don't send it to everybody.
The primary physical symbol of Rosh Hashanah, without which Rosh Hashanah can't take place.
Showing up.
Thank you. Excuse me.
Shofar.
No, the shofar is there.
You got that?
We got that. The primary symbol for Rosh Hashanah, without which Rosh Hashanah cannot take place.
Rosh Chodesh?
The Machzor?
Wait, somebody said it.
Rosh Chodesh?
The moon. Without a new moon, Rosh Hashanah can't take place. And it would be that at the time of the temple, there were witnesses going out, trained astronomical observers, to see when the moon would turn new to proclaim the Rosh Hashanah. And to this day, actually, it's because of that specificity that we have 2 days of Rosh Hashanah out here outside of the land of Israel. Even in the land of Israel, they follow it. Yes.
I want to invoke my father's memory. We would tear toilet paper, turn off all the lights, maybe leave out on a closet light or whatever, but prepare our home so that we didn't do any work.
Would you do that on Shabbat also?
No, I
Just-
don't do any of it now.
No. Would your parents do that on Shabbat?
No,
No, but they did it for the holy days.
yes.
I see. So the holy days were a higher level.
Different level, right.
So,
There's asking people for forgiveness. I mean, that might bleed into the emotional
That's not physical.
part of it. I mean, the act of calling somebody up, or the action, the physical action, there might be something else.
well, that goes over into the Remes now.
Yeah.
What about clearing your mind and therefore your business calendar? I have to go through quite an ordeal to push things off of my calendar to other people.
So clearing a calendar would be, in your mind, physical prep.
Has the conflict of pushing away their business. You must. You must.
Only one communicator.
You have judgment.
Now, would you do that for 2 days or for 1 day?
Well, I try to do it for a long period between, to lighten up between Sukkot and the end of Sukkot. It doesn't work, but I try.
Okay.
So we see that we're beginning to get into the other dimensions of observance, and I think as we go into the emotional aspects of preparing for the holy days, one really key emotional element is the music and how that affects us. So because we have Alan here, I've asked him if he would share with us a few aspects of music that are unique to the High Holidays.
Well, the High Holidays are a kind of musical story told through prose, poetry, and song. The arrangement of the services are what I say linear in nature. We follow pagination in numerical order. A story unfolds through the rabbi speaking, cantor singing, choir singing as well. And every significant landmark in the Jewish year is distinguished by what the musicians called a nusach. Nusach is a very specific melodic idiom that tells you what time of the Jewish year you're in. So for Hanukkah, it's prayers, Mi Chamocha Shema Yisrael, are to that. In Adir Hu is Passover. How does that go?
Dear who?
Adir Hu. Right, that's the Passover motif. But the most sacred, the most mysterious, most exotic, most awesome of them is the High Holiday Nusach, which I remember Rabbi Chefetz teaching some years ago. We should not hear it until now. We're allowed to kind of break, but Rabbi Chefetz had not wanted to hear it until Erev Rosh Hashanah. But
it would frighten me.
Yes. All of the significant rubrics, prayers throughout the service are set. Baruch atah Adonai. We also have Baruchu Michamocha Balim Adonai. All the major prayers are set to that motif. That's called Nusach, and that distinguishes this time of the year from others as the High Holy Days.
When I hear that, I know it's real.
Yes.
You know, and if I haven't done any prep,
this is the time.
Yeah, let me tell you.
And when Rabbi Tom and I were talking about this yesterday, I said, what is so different about the Christian faith? In about a couple of weeks, they're going to start playing Christmas music around October 1st. We don't get to hear ours until a week before Rosh Hashanah. We keep it kind of secret. This is our special time of the year. We kind of don't reveal the mystery of that melody until just now.
The same goes for sections of the liturgy, like Avinu Malkeinu. What can you say about that? Complicated or dramatic than that. Maybe we'll deliver it with simplicity the first time, and then the following morning more, and a week later more. Different ways of executing it. And are they familiar with? Also, there's Zochreinu, special sections and passages.
That's emotional. All you have to hear is that refrain, and it's puts you into a particular place. So we have all the material things on the last page, and then you wrap them with that melody, and somehow you are in the holy days. You're there. You're right there. Any other emotional content.
I think you reach out to family to locate people, those that are here and those that are not, to sort of find them, so that.
Right.
And that includes making funeral or cemetery visits.
Cemetery visits between the holy days.
Buying yard-side candles.
Lighting a yard-side candle is actually for Yom Kippur,
Yeah.
not for Rosh Hashanah. But connecting to family,
Right.
present and past.
Bigger handwriting, Tom, please.
Oh,
Again,
okay.
please.
Let's try that. Bigger handwriting.
Oh, bigger handwriting is associated with the holy day.
Family.
But there are so many that grapple with the cemetery visits, the reaching out and remembering, because we're kind of, I don't want to use the word displaced or misplaced, but we're here. I know in our family, the cemeteries are in New York,
Right.
and the reaching out is reaching in rather than.
I just heard something from Alan. We were talking as we were coming up that Joshua Bell is now the conductor for St. Martin's in the Fields, the new conductor, and he's an American Jew who is conducting this London orchestra. But what I learned that I'd never known before is that orchestras are made up of musicians from all over the world, and they come together and then they go back.
Yes. You don't have to live in the city in which you are a member of that philharmonic.
So, you don't have to be in this city where your loved ones are buried. They're still close to you. And it's almost, there'll be an app for this eventually that you can draw on your iPhone. But that's what happens on Rosh Hashanah. The presence of everybody is drawn together.
But there is an app, and it's called Calling the Office and Buying a Yard-Side Plaque.
Calling the office and buying a yard-side plaque. We're getting this is the commercial for the workshop.
There's something about, I don't want to say it's the people that we don't know, but the people that we only see at Rosh Hashanah. It's like coming into the synagogue, and there's that feeling of that once a year people, it's like there's this festive coming together with people that you don't normally come together with.
I want to test this. I remember it used to be when you came into the synagogue, you were very quiet, you didn't speak to anybody, and you sat down in silence. Do you remember that? Or is that not true?
Yes.
You grew up with that, Esther?
Very much so.
Did you grow up with that, Margaret? And at Temple Israel, that was probably, in the 50s, that was the way it was done. When I grew up in Temple Israel in Boston. But nowadays, it's not so.
Temple Israel, New York.
Say again?
Temple Israel, New York.
Temple Israel, New York. Nowadays, you come in and you see people, you go over and you greet them.
Not my father's temple.
But today, at Temple Israel, you come in, you see people, you go over, you greet them. There's a buzz. Is that true, Alan?
A lot of talk.
A lot of talk.
That's on Friday night. I wonder if it'll be so on the high holiday.
It is. It's on Rosh Hashanah evening. Maybe not Kol Nidre, but Rosh Hashanah evening.
I'm gathering there's more of a joyful vibe that goes on here throughout the High Holy Days, whereas in some other places, or at least long ago in some places, it was probably a much more solemn kind of occasion. So there's always some tension or balance between those two.
It's the joy of seeing people on Rosh Hashanah evening you haven't seen. That was mentioned. Eric mentioned that. Yom Kippur is solemn, and then the blow-up at the end. But we'll get to that next week.
Right. But Rosh Hashanah is also regarded as a time for reflection and the beginning of, or a continuation of the process of repentance that's been ongoing throughout Elul. So, there is the little joyful element that pops up, the birthday of the world and the celebration of creation and reconnecting with people we haven't seen in a long time. But that the mood of teshuvah, that important work is ongoing throughout Rosh Hashanah. And I think there's an element of seriousness, I think, that needs to kind of continue throughout the holiday.
Isn't Erev Rosh Hashanah the same liturgy as Friday Night Shabbat, but it's an expanded version?
Yeah.
It's all the Friday night liturgy. Nothing of a Friday night Shabbat service is omitted.
Right.
And very little else is added.
Well,
The Avinu Malkeinu.
Avinu Malkeinu is the insert in Zochreinu.
when we get to the next page, we'll have a look at that. Ready for the next page?
But there's a lot that goes into the emotional experience of preparing. I mean, you were talking about being, not frightened, but just standing in awe.
I begin to tremble. I've shared this with some of you before. When I was at Beth Am, when I was beginning my rabbinic career, doing confirmation class, there was a confirmand who had the chutzpah to challenge me and said, "Nobody prays here." And I said, "Well, the Rabbi Baumgart prays, and I pray." And she said, "You don't count, you get paid for it." Bless her. So I think I left the rabbinate just to see if I would pray. By then I had learned deeply enough of the tradition, so when the holy days came, I did indeed tremble, even if I didn't have to give any sermons. It is truly a time of exposure. Exposure is a much better word than fear.
I'll share a story.
Yeah.
I was serving as a student rabbi at a small congregation in Great Falls, Montana. This was probably maybe 96. And so it was one of my first High Holy Day assignments, and I had my sermon there, and I was illustrating a point using a story, a Hasidic story, about the prince who had forgotten who he was. And I was so moved. I mean, my emotional state was already pretty heightened by the fact that I was nervous. But I also found that story to be so moving and compelling that it moved me to tears. And I began to cry briefly as I was standing up there on the podium, on the bima in front of the congregation, and they were all bewildered. They were thinking, what happened? Maybe he lost it. The next page of his sermon was missing. But there was that emotional experience for me that is so powerful.
What's the story?
Well, I can just tell the nutshell version of it, but it was the prince who was banished from the kingdom and went off to live a modest life somewhere until his clothes became rags and everyone didn't recognize him anymore, and even he had forgotten who he was. And the king decided to go back out to find him again, and I think grant a request to anyone who wanted to offer, to make a request of him. And this prince asked only for a shelter over his head, or that he could have dry, shoes to wear to keep his feet dry. And the king was sad because this prince, who could have asked for anything, just had completely forgotten who he was and what was possible. And that was a very sad and moving story to me, that somehow we have forgotten that we are the children of, to put it in theistic terms, of a God, of a Father, of a King who could grant us anything we wanted. The metaphors kind of get muddy, but the fact of forgetting who we are and trying to remember. Abraham Joshua Heschel puts it in these terms. He says, we are like a messenger who has forgotten what our message is. There's something we've forgotten. And during these days of awe, and when we hear the sound of the shofar, it's to remind us there's something that we've forgotten that's essential to our well-being.
And now you've got us all in tears.
Let me just say what the holidays do to me. There's New Year's Eve. New Year's Eve does nothing to me anymore, making amends of what's going to happen. But when it comes to the Rosh Hashanah, I sit and meditate and go back to when I was a little boy with my mother, my father, and all those who have passed away. And then when he plays the music, I'm gone completely. But it is a time for reflecting of where I was, who I am, and where I'm going. So that's what it does for me.
Beautifully said. Midrash, the midrashic interpretation, the intellectual aspect of preparation. How do you describe that?
What words need to go up here?
Midrash.
I cleanse. I think of it as I cleanse.
Cleanse?
Yeah, cleanse. Like I mean, I actually do a juice cleanse for Rosh Hashanah, so that's physical. But in my mind, it's much more intellectual. I mean, I actually am cleaning physical house.
Mm-hmm.
Jeff?
Other brain.
I can't hear you.
Other brain. Because to me it means that it's a time to largely forget the intellectual.
Well, then that doesn't belong on this page.
Save it for the next page.
Save it for the next page. Yes.
If you've been asked to participate in the service, you need to prepare. You need to read and see where you're going to be called up in the service.
I know Arthur had something.
I was going to say introspection or meditation, as was said.
Well, meditation can be anywhere along here, but again, that's more spiritual preparation.
Certain aspects of what we're doing tonight kind of falls into the intellectual parts of it.
A High Holy Day workshop. Yeah, definitely.
Study.
Study. Absolutely, study.
Study.
Study in advance.
There are extra readings during the week during chakras. There's a whole other regimen of prayers that are added, and we have to keep track of them. We have to hopefully understand why they're there.
Here, as Alan said, it's the normal course of liturgy. You have the Shema with its blessings. You have the Amidah, the standing prayer. But there are inclusions and changes specific for the Holy Day. Whereas the word melech, king, is used over and over again. And this is in rabbinic tradition where it had already evolved to the Father. So Av Harakamim, merciful Father, Avinu. We have Avinu and Malkeinu, our Father, our King. So there's a transition here between our Father and our King. Our King would be regressive. That's going back to the times of great exposure when we brought offerings, gifts before the King and didn't know if they were going to be acceptable or not. We don't throw away the King. We keep both our Father and our King. So we were singing earlier, Zochrenu l'chayim melech chafetz b'chayim. Remember us for life, a sovereign who desires life, and write us in the book of life. So maybe we put the book of life here. It's a construct. It's a midrashic construct. It's as if there were a heavenly book that was written and our lives were in suspense from Rosh Hashanah to Yom Kippur. As long as I use the words as if, I'm safe. I've been called to task, by the way, for the as if. You know, when I'm studying on the beach at the yeshiva, if I use the words as if, it's as if I don't belong there. He says, what do you mean as if? There is a book, and that book is open. But as if will do it for us. So we say to each other, L'shana tova shekatevu b'sefer ha'chaim tovi. May you be written for a good year into the book of life. Whether we believe it or not. So if you say L'shana tova, the rest is in the ellipsis.
I guess if we think too about the midrashic dimensions of the High Holy Days, we think of the midrashim, the stories that have been created and become part of this these holy days. For example, the Book of Life, that were inscribed on Rosh Hashanah, and that the book is sealed on Yom Kippur, and it's during that time when our fate is in our own hands. Also, an interesting tradition is that the beginning of our preparation for the High Holy Days begins on the 1st of Elul, the month preceding the High Holy Days, and it ends, by some accounts, on Yom Kippur. So that's actually a period of 40 days, corresponding to the 40 days that Moses was on Sinai before coming down with the commandments. That's one midrash, one could say. Another midrash might be the idea that Rosh Hashanah is the creation, the day of the birthday of the world, and all that means.
Everything that went before this page, I could identify with, I could consider. When it comes to the intellectual and all of those things, where I respect them all, when it comes to the High Holy Days and I'm in temple, the intellectual kind of goes away from me. Everything is more sensual and not even in the senses. It's like into my DNA. The music, the feeling that being surrounded by people that like me, that I know and love, or that I don't know and love, and this doesn't come into it. This doesn't prepare me for that feeling of the High Holy Days. Sometimes I'm so welled up that I can't participate, and I don't even know why. It's in my DNA. So this one, this drush is great, but it doesn't. I don't identify with it very much.
That's entirely possible, and others may have that same experience.
It may be, if you remember the diagram, you have the Hey, Vav, the Hey, and the Yud. The two Heys correspond to each other. You have, the feet that walk in the world and prepare, the material things that have to be done in the world, the intellectual preparation. These are things that are done before the day. So you get all the material things before the day, and you do the intellectual preparation before the day. But on the day, it may well be, as soon as you walk in and surrender to the occasion, it's all emotional and spiritual. That raises the question. Should the sermon on Rosh Hashanah be intellectual, or should it be emotional and spiritual? If it's intellectual, perhaps it gets in the way. I had this conversation with somebody recently. It used to be the big things here in Miami was the big building and the intellectual sermon. So it was the Hey and the Hey. Now it's the feeling and the spiritual. We still have the big building, and from time to time, the intellectual sermon. But what makes the community is the emotional ties, and what draws people here is the spiritual content. There may be a shift going on. Well, let me put it differently. You've heard me say this any number of times. There's a shift going on.
Yes. And that would be a good segue into this next dimension, the spiritual dimension of preparing for the High Holy Days.
I'm afraid to go there.
How about if I do? What you talked about, what I've heard you talk about, how stories break you open to, there's the intellectual and then there's the spiritual, and that is a really good story. So I always thought that Drosh was the story that opened you up to the emotional piece. One of the things that really struck me in terms of the Drosh is Lawrence Kushner talking about the wandering through the desert for 40 years. And it never even occurred to me until I read it that was really what depression is. And that's part of the spiritual part of this, that you go through the spiritual wasteland until you come out into this revelation of the creation. And that for me, Rosh Hashanah is not just the creation of the new world, of the world, but it's creation of my new existence for the coming year.
Beautifully said. I glean from that an experience of renewal that happens for you. Yeah.
Just going one step further with what she said, because I agree with that. I think it's recommitment. I know every year I go and I say, this is the year that I'm going to get involved. This is the year that I'm going to do more. I'm going to go, this was the year. I did it. But I've been saying it since I was little. You know, so I think it's always been for me a time of recommitment.
So we have, you used the word renewal, you used the word, begin with what was it?
I used the word renewal.
Renewal.
You said recommitment.
Recommitment.
Recreation.
Recreation. And return.
Oh, yeah.
So everything Yes, Ian.
It seems for me at this time of year in the High Holy Days, there's always a major change or shift. And I spend a lot of time thinking about the prior year and what has been evolving to the point of getting ready for the change and what is it going to be for the coming year.
Could everybody hear that? No. It was reviewing the last year, getting ready for the next. The review of the prior year is called Cheshbon Nefesh, taking in account of the soul. You tally up what's been happening to the soul. And I don't like talking about this. It's too hard. It's hard.
Rick.
I find that by the time if I'm fortunate enough to get there, have gotten to the spiritual level, it is not an unpleasant experience. It is not a depressing thing. It's not a scary thing. It's uplifting. It's like getting into your falsetto when you're singing, getting up there. It's to me, it's already almost out of the days of awe.
I would guess all our experiences are vastly different one from another, and that's one experience I'm sure many share. My experience is it's almost like going through a doorway and coming out the other side of it. And when you go through it, you don't always know what the outcome is going to be. And I think maybe that's one theme in the High Holy Days, is you're in that period when your life is in the balance and you really don't know what the outcome is going to be. And theoretically, you go all the way through to the very end of Yom Kippur. I mean, you're fasting on that day and you're pouring out your heart and soul with the hope that you come out somehow from that process in a new way.
As a person who's just starting to learn that I have a spiritual side to myself, the word that fits in there for me anyway might be revelation, because I'm discovering things during this period.
Revelation, rediscovery.
Revelation.
Yeah.
They're all R-E words.
I know, that's what.
What's the opposite of an R-E?
E-R, but you don't want to go there.
I noticed that Revelation is, revel, that there's a kind of revelry that happens there too, yeah?
Yes.
Now, the shofar service, at the end of Rosh Hashanah morning, has three parts: kingship, remembrance, and revelation. Is the way it's usually translated. So revelation is the ultimate experience on Rosh Hashanah. It's as if the various levels of creation are opened up until one can see the full expanse, as if the sound of the shofar blasts it open. Wow. That's an experience unique to Rosh Hashanah. We have the final tekiah on Yom Kippur, but we don't have the full resounding volleys of the shofar on Yom Kippur, only in Rosh Hashanah. Okay.
I've got a couple of briefs. recollection, we talked about and remembrance. We do both of those things, both in preparation and on the days.
We didn't plan all these REs.
It works.
It does work, doesn't it? A little bit scary.
For me, the preparation is physical, intellectual, being sure I know what to expect, what the service is, what the meanings are. But that allows me, when walking into the service, to just surrender at that point and just go with the emotional and the spiritual and not think about what this is, what's coming next, what the analysis, leave the intellectual completely outside. That's the preparation. But I need to then experience.
I pick up on the word that you said, surrender.
That's the S word.
That's a good one. I mean, to be able to, you're building up, you're preparing, and then there comes a time when you just have to surrender it all. That theme is so prominent in the liturgy. Yeah.
Well, the RE means to do again, to repeat it. So everything that's there, you didn't write in surrender, but all the REs mean that we're doing it again. So my feeling is that maybe this time we'll get it right.
Alan, do we sing the tune Return Again?
We're going to have it on Slichot.
We do it on Slichot?
Yeah, we'll do Return Again.
Yeah,
Resurrection.
We don't do resurrection. Actually, that's not quite true. In this book, restores the dead to life is the traditional expression. That's resurrection, and that we do Mechaye HaKol, who sustains everything. So we change that in our expression of liturgy. Except once, Yom Kippur afternoon, when the sun is getting low and we don't know whether or not we're in the book of life, let me tell you, it's Mechaye Metim. It's right in here. It goes back to resurrection. So that when push comes to shove, we shove.
There's another powerful story of sacrifice and resurrection, and that is the Akedah, the binding of Isaac, which is the Torah reading that's traditionally read on the second day of Rosh Hashanah. That's a really powerful story of surrender and of kind of going through that process and coming out with a completely different and much more positive outcome.
The only re that I don't see there is reappear. I've been an usher and I usually take tickets at the front. And year after year after year after year, the only time I ever get to see certain people is when they reappear. That's right.
Don't criticize for that for them, or they might not show up.
And they're members. And then you go to Yom Kippur for Yizkor service where anybody can come in, and many more reappear that I see once a year. It is a fascinating situation. Why? Some come in, they don't even stay. They just walk through the door, and 2 minutes later they turn around and they walk back out.
I have heard of a rabbi who includes in his sermon, he says on the High Holy Days, he says, and by the way, if I don't see you later, I wish you a happy Passover.
They only come one place after
you know something? You've been coming to Shabbat services lately, virtually everybody here. If you haven't been, you will be. That's all. I come and sit with my wife. I hope more often, if you let me alone.
Now, I want to come back to this word return, because that's the one translation of the word teshuvah. Another translation is repentance. Another re word could be on here. But it might be a good exercise for us to explore the meaning of that word teshuvah on all of these 4 levels. You know, returning. You know, we return to the synagogue. We return to these melodies and these emotional experiences that we have. We return to the liturgy and to the stories and the traditions that connect us. But spiritually, what does it mean to do teshuvah? I would like to explore that subject for a few minutes. Teshuvah, return.
Does it mean return? Does it mean turn? Does it mean just turn, not return, but turn from what you do, what you think, to another way of doing it, just turning? And repentance, is it repentance for what you have done or have not done, or repentance for something that somebody did to you? You know, maybe somebody should repent a little bit to me. You know, they hurt me a little bit. There's a lot of discussion. I mean, there's room for 2 or 3 sermons in there.
That sounds very intellectual, Edith.
But that goes away when I move. When you come here, it goes away.
Right. Well, the answer to your question, whether it's this or that, the answer is yes. It's all of those.
There's one other re. I'm sure there are many others. Response. If you know Hebrew, the primary meaning of teshuvah is response. I ask you a question, you give me a response.
Right.
You know, if it's a response, then the question is, what's the question? Now, this goes down to the deepest of the deep, as my teacher would have said. The question, there's only one question that is ever asked at depth, and that is, where do I go from here? The assumption is, in this last year, I have committed averot, transgressions. And because of the transgressions, I have not accomplished as much as I could have in partnership with the Holy One. And if I could only straighten out from here, and in the next year, you know, get a better percentile of work of my effort and with the Holy One. Well, the only difficulty is I don't know where to go exactly. So at depth, I ask, please redirect. There's another one. Redirect me. Give me a response. Give me an answer to my question. And my question is, where do I go from here? And that's a
Where do you find such an answer?
You do not find an answer. You are redirected. Let me explain. In the process of preparing for this work, the work we're doing here right now is kind of getting rid of all sorts of baggage and stuff that weighs us down, and asking forgiveness from each other, we unburden ourselves of guilt. Guilt is the friction that keeps us from hearing any answers. And if we should become frictionless, then we become like the needle on a compass. And when we surrender, there's that word, then we can be moved by Ruach HaKodesh, the divine wind that blows through the universe. When we re-emerge, another arc, at the end of Yom Kippur, it's with a slightly new direction. A slightly new direction.
Can I follow up? I don't want to.
Sure.
In the liturgy and everything, it's we ask for forgiveness for the sins that we've committed,
yes,
and the ones that have been. That's kind of up there in the air. Is Teshuvah the time when you go to somebody who you're aware you've done something and you've hurt?
That's there.
Is that the time, Teshuvah, is that the time you go and I say, hey, I know I said something untoward and I really want to say I'm sorry. So if you do that, then what happens if the person says, the heck with you, you hurt me and I don't even want to forgive you, then all the things that I'm trying to do the right thing, to unburden myself, to ask for forgiveness is rejected, another horrible word. Then, where do you go from there,
You try 3 times, is that
That's correct.
To ask for forgiveness and then you're absolved?
No.
No?
No, I'm sorry.
Only the person...
You're screwed. I mean, the nice version of it is you're absolved. You've done it 3 times, and then it's on you. But the stricter, the machmir, I'm the tough one. He's the loving one. You have to have a tough cop and a loving cop. The expression is, better the sin you sin against the Holy One than the sin you sin against your fellow person. Because the Holy One is always available for forgiveness, but your fellow person may not be. The Holy One will always forgive, whereas your fellow person may not. But, Tom is correct. The halakha says you go 3 times, and after that you don't be a nudge. Then you're nudging the person, which is another transgression. But don't transgress. The other great expression is this. The transgression that you remember, the Holy One forgets. The mitzvah, the good deed that you remember, the Holy One forgets. The good deed you forget, the Holy One remembers. And the transgression, and I've forgotten where I am with this. The
transgression you forget, the Holy One remembers.
The transgression you forget, the Holy One remembers. Yes.
Mitch, one thing that bothers me, you say people are looking for an answer, where do I go from here?
Yes.
I really don't want to know, because the problem is I'm always looking, where do I want to go from here, rather than enjoy what I have now. And enjoy what I have now when the others are going to come. Spend too much time, where do I want to go from here? If somebody gave me an answer, I might be frightened, rather than enjoy what I have now. And that's what I find myself. I'm continually looking, where am I going? And why am I going? Rather than enjoy what I have here.
I hear you.
I've heard it said that the only question there is the question that God asked Adam in the Garden of Eden, and that is, Ayeka, where are you? Maybe not where are you going.
Where are you is okay.
Where are you now? Norma, you had something you
Yeah, I want to take a different tack, but go back to Teshuvah and return. And I don't remember the page, and I don't remember the exact wording, but there's a prayer in the Matzor that says, if faced with the same situation, you would respond, Mitch, to use your response, differently. So maybe it's not looking for where you're going from here, but just in that specific situation, to look for a different response. And that's how you know you've repented, if indeed the first response is something you wouldn't necessarily want to be published in whatever newspaper we can get something in.
The Talmudic statement is a bit more blunt. It's same woman, same opportunity, different result.
Okay.
Diane.
Yes, the asking for forgiveness from someone that you may have wronged or done something untoward. The halakha of ask if they don't forgive you, the process of requesting forgiveness and expressing remorse 3 times absolves you emotionally from carrying that guilt or that sin any longer. If the person doesn't or won't forgive you, you don't need to feel responsible any longer because you made that sincere effort to request forgiveness. And I'm speaking from personal experience. I had a very recalcitrant relative who absolutely refused my overtures of apology for something which I was not aware what it was she was angry with me about. And so I tried 3 times. And after 3 times, I let it go. It was not my problem any longer.
Good. Good example. A few comments, starting from this.
Yeah, I'm just curious, it's sort of sideways, but in the 12-step program, they ask you to ask, for forgiveness, unless the doing so would hurt that person. Any response to that?
I guess that's kind of situational, maybe. It depends on what the situation is.
So how do you get yourself absolved in that case?
Right.
Can the therapist answer? I think what's missing here is, yes, we can ask for forgiveness 3 times, but what we often forget is that we don't forgive ourselves for what we've done, and that's really the block that prevents us from moving forward.
To get back to the RE, I think a lot of this discussion, repair.
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 Very good.
While we're on this topic of remembered transgressions, this is the story I tell every year. It's the public story. It's Erev Rosh Hashanah. We're preparing a meal. We're having family, friends over in anticipation of Rosh Hashanah. Suddenly we need parsley. We don't have any parsley. You've got to go to Publix and get parsley. You drive to Publix, you rush there, you get the parsley. It's a long line. It's the 10-item or less checkout, and the guy in front of you has 14 items. And let me tell you, and finally you get there, and you rush out of the parking lot, you back up fast, and you just touch somebody else's car. You just touch it. And you get out of the car. I mean, really, who has time for this? I got the parsley, I got to get home. You go home, you rush home, and there's this beautiful meal, and you're about to sit down to it, the telephone rings. And you go over and say, who's calling at a time like this? And the person says, do you drive a Toyota Avalon? I say, yes. License tag, auto tag, such and such? Yes. That was my car you hit at Publix. Oh. And then you're very sorry. It's as if each of us in Rosh Hashanah afternoon gets a call, a phone rings, and you pick it up and is this Mitch Shefetz? How do you pronounce that? Shefetz. He says, yes. Moshe ben Benjamin Yaakov Shifra? Yes. Who is this? This is God. I know. That's it.
Leonard, what's his name? A great musician, Leonard Feinstein. No, I'm thinking Leonard Feinstein, though. Was it Leonard Bernstein who wrote this song, Who Shall Live and Who Shall Die? There, he was
Leonard Cohen.
Leonard Cohen, that's who that was. And the line of that song is, Who shall I say is calling? Very appropriate.
Bless him.
There was one other, Arthur.
I was going to get back to something Rabbi Rick said earlier. So if you were giving a sermon on the high holidays, would it be spiritual or intellectual?
Yes.
One other illustration I wanted to give about Teshuvah is there's something that's very natural about it. That it's a natural human response that's possible for everyone. I was watching last week a movie with my wife, something called Salmon Fishing in Yemen. Heard of that? Okay. It's kind of a crazy idea about someone who, some sheikh who wanted to have salmon somewhere in the middle of the desert in Yemen. And so he hired this engineer to create a dam and a river and bring in salmon, and so he could go fishing. Anyway, they couldn't get, wild salmon. They had to get farmed salmon from a farm. And they were saying, well, they're probably not going to know how to swim upstream. I mean, they're just not used to that. And the thought was, well, maybe it's an inbred characteristic, that they have, even if they've lost that skill in one generation or a few generations. It might still be there, that when they encounter a river, they might rediscover that inclination to swim upstream. And so they brought all these salmon there, and they had them in this pool, and when they finally released them, they start floating downstream. And they're all thinking, oh my gosh, this is not going to work. And then one salmon turns around and starts swimming upstream. And then another, and another. And yeah, like that. And so there's something that's inborn, something within us, a natural spiritual response. Even if we say, I'm not spiritual. We all know in some deep way what teshuvah means. I want to start to draw to a close by asking the question, how do you want to experience the High Holy Days this year? And your answer is going to be very personal, because only you really know the answer to that question. But I want you to ask yourself, not just now, but as we walk out the doors and in the days that follow, how do you want to experience the High Holy Days this year? How can it be a new experience, something, an experience deeper than one you've ever experienced in years past? That may be only a question you can answer, but hopefully this workshop has given you some of the tools and ideas and ways that we find meaning during the season. I want to say a few other things. One opportunity we'll have, and some of you I think plan to be here, is on Saturday night we'll have a slichot service. Now what is slichot? It literally means forgiveness, or prayers for forgiveness in the plural. And these are special readings and piyutim and poems that are written for and recited during this time of slichot. It's a time, in the Sephardic tradition, they recite these prayers for the entire month of Elul. In the Ashkenazi tradition, they begin on the very beginning of the week prior to Rosh Hashanah. Now, if Rosh Hashanah falls on a Tuesday or earlier, and then it's the week before, so there are at least 4 days of slichot before Rosh Hashanah. So this year slichot falls on this coming Sunday, and that's why in many traditional synagogues, they'll have their slichot service at midnight on Saturday. Now, because our attendance at midnight on Saturday probably wouldn't be so good, we're going to have an earlier program. It begins at 7:30 with a program for children and another one for adults, some learning, the basics of, everything you wanted to know about slichot. From 8:30 to 9 will be a delicious dessert oneg. From 9 o'clock to 10 o'clock, upstairs in the boardroom, will be a text study facilitated by Diane and Judith, right? Ruth Marks, Joseph's Table Style. And then from 10 to 10:30 is a candlelit slichot service in our chapel. It'll be beautiful. And the music is very moving and really will help to further your preparation for the High Holy Days.
And next week, another workshop, this time focusing on Yom Kippur and looking especially at some lines of the liturgy that are unique to the day.
Kol Nidre.
Kol Nidre. And we'll look at the pivotal line in the morning service, Teshuvah, Tefillah, Tzedakah, Ma'avirin et Torah Gezerah. Repentance, charity, and prayer can alter the evil of the decree. That's the operative line, and there are different ways of understanding that and different ways of getting to it.
I'd like to close with a reading, and then I invite you to stay. We have some refreshments here, and we're happy to stay and chat with you here, or you can talk amongst yourselves. But this is a reading drawing from the word re, the prefix re, that seems to be coming up again and again. And this is by Chaim Stern, who served as rabbi here in 2001. This is from one of the beautiful meditations that precede the beginning of the liturgy in our Machzor, our High Holy Day prayer book. There is a grace that every dawn renews, a loveliness making every morning fresh. We will endure, we will prevail, we, the children of hope, children of the One, who crowds the heavens with stars, endows the earth with glory, and fills the mind with wonder. The Shana Tova. Thank you.